Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Bittner, and I'm with the ESRD National Coordinating Center. Thank you for joining us today for the ESRD NCC Patient Education Webinar event. The ESRD NCC webinar events are held in partnership with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The calls feature patient and professional subject matter experts from around the country showing how they or their organization are coping with situations related to COVID-19. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this call is being recorded and will be posted on the NCC COVID webpage, usually within 3 business days. Many times we will have the recording up on the webpage well before that 3 business days, however. So let's go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. Today, we are happy to have Sherry McCormick and William Sr. III, who goes by Bill. Sherry and Bill are patient subject matter experts, and they both volunteer their time with the National Patient and Family Engagement Learning and Action Network, which we will refer to as the NPFE-LAN. And as part of this group, they partner alongside other subject matter experts to share their stories, ideas, and perspectives, and to help other patients become more engaged in their health and care to improve their quality of life. Our topic for today is choosing a kidney transplant during COVID-19. So what is this call all about? You will hear tips to empower yourself to cope with COVID-19. We will share some real-world experiences that you can put to use, and we have some resources for you to share with others. And then this series of calls is available to you, offering a variety of topics. If I can have the next slide. Before we start with our presentation, we wanted to share with you a few online resources. The NCC website offers many COVID-19 patient resources, from where you can find online information to ways to empower yourself, to learning how to connect virtually with others. This website offers a variety of information. You can access handouts, webinars, videos, and links to trustworthy organizations. If you haven't visited already, we invite you to check out www.kidneycovidinfocenter.com and then click on For Patients. And then please check back often because new resources are added frequently. Next slide. The NCC website also offers a web page with information for patients and family members. The resources available on this page would be appropriate for someone new to kidney disease, someone who's thinking about changing their treatment option, or interested in learning more about their current treatment. The resources provided provide information about what to expect if you have been recently diagnosed with kidney disease and need to consider dialysis or transplantation. It talks about some differences. It offers information about what to expect if you're newly diagnosed, choosing transplantation, considering home dialysis, offers information about infection prevention, which is really helpful where we are right now, emergency planning, and then we also have a whole section on caregiving. For this information, you should visit www.esrdncc.org/patient. So at this time, what I'd like to do is go ahead and introduce our speakers, Sherry. Let's begin our presentation. One of our, as our panelists begin their presentation and you have questions, please submit them using the chat feature through the WebEx or the Q&A, which you may find on your lower right of the screen. And when we get to the question and answer section of this presentation, we are going to share those questions that we've received with our speakers. And then our goal is to get to as many answers as our time allows. So at this time, we'd like to introduce Sherry McCormick. And Sherry lives in Missouri and is with Q-Source ESRD Network 12, which serves Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. She's currently using home hemodialysis and started volunteering with the NPFE-LAN just this year. Sherry enjoys spending time with her family, which includes 10 grandchildren, and taking care of her homestead with her husband. And we're not going to go into too much information about Sherry because she's going to really talk a lot about herself and her decision to go on the transplant waitlist during COVID-19. Sherry, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm pleased to be here. I guess I'll just start out a little bit with approximately 3 years ago, after several serious illnesses and some surgeries and a very bad infection, my blood work showed that I needed to visit with a nephrologist. So that's where my journey began, and I went to the nephrologist, and I wasn't quite ready for dialysis, but we became proactive, and I got a fistula, which failed before I ever even got started, and then I got my graft put in, and I started home hemo 2.5 years ago, I guess, and I visited in-center two or three times, I suppose, but other than that, I've been on home hemo for 2.5 years, so that's kind of where that journey began.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And when did you decide to go on the transplant waitlist? And what were your initial concerns because of COVID-19?
Well, when I started, COVID wasn't an issue. I started a year ago. But right when it became time for my scheduled appointments for my evaluation, then COVID hit. So I received a call to see if I wanted to wait approximately 6 months or more, or if I would be interested in doing it virtually. And I guess I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. I wanted to proceed on. I wanted to do what I could, so I agreed to do it virtually. And this was with one facility, one transplant center. I was working with two, but the first one was the virtual. And I thought, well, this could either be more difficult or easier, and I felt more comfortable here in my own home, and I had a little bit of experience with doing things virtually, not always the best results, but I do, I had a little bit of experience, so I chose to go ahead and do that, and we started out with the first virtual visit as an evaluation, and I think it was the first really that they had done, at least in our region. Would you like to know a little bit more about?
And I'm sorry, Sherry, and when you talk about when you were doing it virtual,
Yes.
Were you talking about going through your appointments virtually? Can you
yes,
talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure, I should be more specific about that. I met with the doctors just like you would if you went for your evaluation in person. I met with the surgeon, with the nephrologist, social worker, all of those things we did via telehealth. And instead of me actually going to the transplant center for those things. And then this was prior to any additional testing they needed or anything like that, because of course then I had to start with going into the facilities for those visits, for scans or CT scans or ultrasounds of my abdomen, just different things like that. Then I had to start going through visits. But first I went through the portion where I met with each doctor extensively, talking to them and going over my history and all of that. So,
So your initial interviews were done using telehealth, telemedicine, and
correct.
you were able to kind of do those all at home.
Correct.
And how did you like that? How was that different for you than some of the other appointments that you've done?
I actually did like it very, very much. There was no language barrier. There was no, the mask. We didn't have to wear masks, so I could speak freely, and I was just, it was much more comfortable for me, because then on the other end of this, I did another evaluation like everyone else does, that I had to go in and meet with the nephrologist, the surgeon, etc., and we had to wear masks. And between the two, I feel like doing it telehealth was easier for me. It was more comfortable. I didn't have to say excuse me or anything like that, hardly at all. So it was just much more comfortable for me. Now, that could be different for others, but for me it was much more comfortable that way.
Okay. And so it sounds like you are listed on more than one, you're listed with more than one center, so you're on more than one list.
Well,
is that correct?
Yes, I'm still in the evaluation process. I've gone through all my testing and everything. I'm just waiting for the doctors now to meet and make a decision about being on the list. We're working toward living donor, of course, and my husband would like to be that or do the exchange program. So that's where we're working on. Because I've had very many surgeries. For me, placement of the kidney is an essential thing as far as having very few places that I might be able to place the kidney. So that's where we're at right now.
All right. What led you to seek out to be on with or to list with two centers?
I think I was just applying to anyone that I might, because I am a high-risk patient, so I was just reaching out to see if anyone would take a chance on me, and actually they both did. I wasn't sure either one would, but they both did, so that's why I chose to go with two. I didn't realize they would kind of intersect, and I'd be working on both situations at one time, but so far it hasn't been a huge problem.
Now, I know when you mentioned that initially this happened just as COVID-19 began and when we started to have all the changes. Did you have any initial concerns in the beginning related to COVID-19 as you were going on the wait list?
I didn't at the time. I just knew I wanted a kidney, so I was just going to do whatever I needed to do to get there. Now, as we've gone through the process, I've come to realize that I actually feel safer now than I think I, looking back, would have. There are so many more safety precautions in place. There are fewer people entering and exiting the hospital. You're limited on who can come in and where they can go in the hospital, and they are just much more cautious. So looking back at what I didn't think of when I started this process, and now I feel like maybe it's a safer situation than it was prior to COVID. That's just my personal opinion.
Those are excellent points. How are you staying prepared for a transplant during this environment?
Well, I think we all know that the most important thing is trying to stay as self-quarantined as you can. I mean, I'm one that I want to live life as well as I can and stay safe. Because when you get that call, although, like I said, I'm working on a living donor, but if you were waiting for that call, you would certainly want to stay as healthy and as well protected from COVID as you could. But other than that, I think I don't have the fear right now. I thought I would, but I don't because of all the extra precautions and stuff. So I just take those normal ones that we read about every day that we should do. You wear your mask, you use your hand sanitizer, you wash your hands, you stay in a clean environment, and that's about the best you can do.
And you share too. You stay very active.
Oh yes, I do. I'm active here at my home, of course, but we also, with it being summer, we're water sports people, and we get out on the lake and we have our boat and we continue to do things. You just have to be smart. I garden, I cook, of course, the grandkids are everything to me. So, I just try to stay very busy and active and healthy as I can, eating what I should eat and just trying to stay healthy in that way.
Okay. And as you go through this process, Sherry, what is your transplant center doing to help you prepare for a transplant, especially in this COVID-19 environment?
That's kind of a loaded question. As far as being prepared, I haven't completely finished that evaluation process, so, the preparedness is not there yet. You know what I mean?
That's good feedback.
Because I won't be waiting. I'm not waiting on a call yet, or I'm not officially on a list. But, the same things. They just want me to stay, as healthy as I can stay at this point and as active as I can stay. And I'm just waiting for them to give me that okay, and then I could probably answer that question just a little bit better.
So you mentioned your husband. What type of support is he providing during this whole process, and what's helpful for you to receive from him as you're going through this testing to get on the list?
Well, he naturally is my care partner also with my home hemodialysis. He's done that for me, and nothing I thought a lot would change for him as far as going to the hospitals and that sort of thing, but it really hasn't. For all my appointments, he's been able to be in there with me. Of course, when you go for your testing, everything, you have to have a COVID test 2 days prior, that kind of thing. And but he's able to go to waiting rooms while I've had any procedures done. I just recently did have a little blockage removed, and I thought that he wouldn't be able to be with me. And of course, had I been admitted, he wouldn't have been able to come to the room with me. Now that if I were waiting for a kidney, I don't suppose they could be with you, and that might be very difficult for some people. I know Mark and I have been together for 40 years. He's my care partner. He's my partner forever. So to be away from him when I was going through that process may worry some people. Having the technology that we have now, and you can FaceTime or you can Zoom or whatever you need to do to be able to see one another, that's very fortunate at this time that we have that technology, since they couldn't be with you in the hospital overnight and that kind of thing. At least we have forms of communication where we can see one another and talk. So we've discussed that if I should be in the hospital for days or whatever without him, at least we have that communication where we can see one another and talk.
So, knowing that if you did receive a call for a transplant and he may not be able to be there with you, would that be a deterrent for you, or is it just helpful for you to know that that's something that you need to just recognize that he may not be able to physically be there for you, but you have other technology to be able to connect?
I do not think that would hold me back personally, although he is my everything. I mean, he's my partner, period. And I would be sad, but knowing that we have the technology, and if people don't know how to use it, those nurses and everyone, they're going to help. They're going to help to be able to utilize some sort of system to be able to, but I don't think that would deter me personally from it.
Very good.
I think it's such an important thing that, I know some people may need that more personal, be right there thing, but for myself, that's not necessary as long as I can communicate with them.
Very good. What recommendation would you make to someone who is thinking about going on the transplant wait list, but might be hesitant for one reason or another?
I think that it would be very important to make a list of your concerns. Excuse me. Make a list of your concerns and share those with your transplant team or your nephrologist or anyone, like what if, or if I get the call, is someone going to make sure that I can communicate with my loved ones, and whatever your concern is about safety measures. But that, being in and out of the hospital for the last month, doing the different testing and what for, the safety measures that are in place are just really amazing to me at the two facilities that I'm dealing with. They are so kind and so understanding of the anxiety that people are under, and they try to make you as comfortable as they can and answer any questions. So I'm certain that my suggestion would be to make a list of anything that might come to mind that you have concerns about, because I am certain that your team, my team and my coordinators are amazing at answering any questions that I have.
Very good. Thank you very much, Sherry, for sharing a little bit about what you're going through and sharing your perspective with everything related to COVID-19 and just your current experience with the transplant waitlist. We appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
At this time, I'd like to introduce William Bill Sr. Bill joins us from New Jersey and is with Quality Insights Network 3, which serves New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Bill has been involved with the NPFE land for almost 5 years. He is currently using in-center hemodialysis, and Bill enjoys spending time with his family. And before COVID-19 became part of our environment, would spend time going to the movies with his wife, but now enjoys watching movies at home and then also attending church at home virtually through Facebook. Bill is on the transplant wait list and is going to share with us an experience he had a few months ago with receiving a call for a kidney transplant during COVID-19. This is not the first call that Bill has received, and he's going to talk about some of the differences that he noticed because of COVID-19. He's also going to share how he keeps a positive outlook because unfortunately that call and the trip to the hospital did not result in a transplant. Welcome to the call, Bill.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hi. Now, before we talk about your experience with that call, can you tell us how long you've been on dialysis? And I know that you're an in-center, that you use in-center hemodialysis. Are there any other treatments that you've used previously?
Yes, I've been on dialysis for 11 years. The first year, almost to the day, was on PD, peritoneal dialysis. I was on there until I had a hernia. So I had to get rid of the catheter in my stomach, and I went to in-center hemo as soon as I could. And I've been on that for the last 10 years. So it's been an adventure.
And how long have you been on the transplant waitlist?
This time, I've been on the transplant wait a couple places, but this time I've been on since March of 2020. I actually was given the letter to be on the wait list, that I passed all the tests, and then probably 1 or 2 days later, they shut everything down because of COVID. So, and at that point, I didn't hear anything from the transplant hospital. I didn't hear anything. So it was a little disconcerting, but I believe everything's gonna work out.
Okay. Now, how many times have you received a call that you were a candidate for a transplant?
Okay. I've been on the waitlist 2 different places. This last place that I'm currently on, I received 2 calls a week apart. The first call, I was not made an offer. What they did was they said, there is a kidney, we're not making an offer. They emphasized that. We're not making an offer, but we want to know how long it will take you to get to the hospital. How do you feel? Who's coming with you? They asked me a lot of questions, and I answered the questions. They said, if we're going to offer you the kidney, it will probably be in the next few hours. So stay by your phone, and we'll see what happens. Well, they did call me back, but it was just to tell me that, the kidney was offered to someone else, which I was glad someone else got blessed, but, and I knew my time was coming. The next week, I was offered, they called me when I was in my center's dialysis parking lot, and I was getting ready to go in for my treatment, and I got a call behind the steering wheel, and they said, we have a kidney for you. And I said, oh. I said, well, I'm getting ready to have my treatment. They said, well, do your treatment. And when you do your treatment, when you finish your treatment, we want you to come directly to the hospital. So I'm like, wow. I got excited, and but I had to tell them that I was having a pain in my stomach and chest area. So I didn't know if I would be accepting any offers at this time because I wanted that resolved. So they said, well, we want to put a new kidney in you today. I said, okay, I'll come down, but I do have this pain. And I did do my treatment. My wife drove me there, and you may have some more questions about that, but so that day was very exciting. Everyone was excited for me. my social worker, everyone. Someone even started crying, and I'm thinking, thank you for this. Thank you for crying. Thank you for being happy for me. But I just, want everyone to be a little reserved because, the way I'm feeling now, I may not accept kidney. And so that's what happened recently.
Okay. And that was the call, so the most recent call where you ended up going to the hospital.
Yes.
Can you share with us what that experience was like when you went to the hospital during COVID-19? What was that experience like? What differences did you notice just going into that hospital during this environment?
Well, when we got to the hospital, the first thing I noticed was there was no valet parking anymore. My wife and I always parked in a spot where we could get our car parked and just walk in. So there was no one there. We had to park. My wife had to park the car, and she said, you go on in to registration or whatever you have to go. I'll park the car and I'll meet you inside. So she parked the car. We were inside. There was social distancing in the chairs. We were able to sit close together, though, in the waiting room at the registration area. And after I registered and everything, a nurse came to get me, and she told my wife, okay, hugs and kisses to your husband. You have to go home. You have to leave. And my wife was like, what? She said, no, you have to go home. And she said, well, can I just wait in the parking lot to hear the results of the operation? She said, no, you have to go home. You have to go home. So, it was a little, during these types of visits, the hospital or appointments, she's usually with me. And, but this time she had to go. And she understood that. She understood that. There was no, she didn't have a problem with it, but it was just shocking to hear it, for the first time. You have to leave. And I don't know if you wanted me to give more information about what happened in the room.
Well, sure. Share that with us. How was it like going through the test, through this experience? What was that like for you?
Well, I was tested for the first time for COVID using that nasal test, and that was very uncomfortable for me. It was very uncomfortable. And so they did that. They ran a lot of blood work. They had a lot of people coming in and out and putting needles in, trying to get needles in, and I'm trying to tell some people, you might not want to try to stick me in the back of my hand because I've never been successful. You would do well to stick me, at another place. And sometimes I think people get offended, when you say that. I'm not sure, but it kind of seemed like it. So they tried and they failed, and then they had to get a specialist to come in and cannulate me, and that was, I think it's tough for a lot of dialysis patients because a lot of times our vessels are not, it's hard to stick needles in, but they eventually got a needle in that they could take medicine out or take blood out, and also put a something in where they could give me medicine in my arm, my other non-dialysis arm. So it was a whole process, and it took a while.
How long were you there?
How long was I in that room or in that hospital? Well, what happened was, this is one of my other stories. The pain that I was feeling in my stomach, I guess they were going to do an examination of me. So they wanted to do a CAT scan. They did a CAT scan, and then they said, what's wrong with your back? And I said, there's nothing wrong with my back. You don't have pain in your back? I said, no. They're rubbing my back. They're pushing my back. Nothing's wrong. So then they said, well, we're going to do an MRI on you. I said, okay, fine. And they did an MRI at 1 o'clock in the morning. They did an MRI of me. And when I came back, they said, you have osteomyelitis. You have an infection in your bones. And I'm thinking they're talking about another person. But they were talking about me. And so the next day, they did a biopsy of my spine. And after the biopsy, they wanted to see the results of it. So I was in the hospital for 5 days to wait for the result of this biopsy of my spine and this culture. They were waiting for the culture to grow, and nothing ever came of it. Nothing ever came of it. So it was like I guess a discrepancy, or I supposed to have this osteomyelitis or had this infection, but I never showed it in the culture. So that was a little strange. And I said, is it possible I don't have an infection? And they said, no, you have an infection. You have an infection because of the way your back looks. So I was in the hospital 5 days, and then they just let me go home. And then a surgeon, a transplant surgeon, called me and said, have you heard the good news? And I said, no, what's the good news? He said, you don't have an infection. So I said, well, no one has told me that. And he said, I was given a 6-week course of vancomycin to take. And he said, stop taking the vancomycin. Well, just to make the long story short, I was getting 2 different stories from 2 different doctors, and I didn't know who was telling me the real thing. So I didn't know what to do. But I always felt that, and this is where you may feel that I feel like I have a good attitude. I always feel like things are going to work out for me. You know, I read the scriptures every day, and it talks about all things work together for good. So that's what I believe for my life. It's always worked out. I believe it was good that I didn't get the kidney then, because I felt like it wasn't my time. It was someone else's time. So that's okay with me, you know. And so that's what happened there. So now I'm just waiting to get back on the active list. I'm still waiting for this pain in my stomach to be resolved. And once that's the last thing, they said I'll be back fully on the active list.
Very good. Do you have any recommendations or tips for someone that's considering going on the transplant wait list? I mean, you've had a lot of varying experiences.
Yes.
What would you recommend to someone?
I would, my initial reaction would be I would tell them to do it or get the test done. You'll find out after being tested on the to get on the transplant list. If there's issues that you have, if there are things that maybe need to be resolved. I see a lot of doctors, and there were some things that I said, wow, this was revealed when I went to the transplant hospital. How come it wasn't revealed before? I don't know, but I'm really glad I had all these tests, and it's a ton of tests, because they want to make sure you're healthy enough to hold a kidney. And I appreciate that, and I think a person that is really thinking about it seriously should get the test, and if they don't want to proceed with it, they can always just say, stop. But I would encourage them to have the test done if possible.
I think that's a good recommendation, considering all your experience with this. And I appreciate all the information that you shared about your experience and your positive attitude that you do continue to maintain with going forward with a transplant. So thank you, Bill, for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
And someone Ken just shared knowledge is power in our chat, so I just wanted to share that with everyone on the WebEx as well. So we would like to thank both Sherry and Bill for sharing their experiences and their personal expertise, and we do appreciate this information. We now would like to hear your questions. If you haven't done so already, we have received a few. Please submit any questions that you might have for our panelists using the chat feature or the Q&A through the WebEx. And I do notice a few that we've received, so I will go ahead and ask them. And I asked Jerome and Matt, if I've missed any, please let me know. One question that we received from Courtney, it looks like this was submitted, Sherry, when you were speaking. It looks like Courtney asks, had you started the in-person process with the other center? So this is most likely when we were talking about the telehealth. So when we were comparing your telehealth process, if you had started the in-process center when you were doing the telehealth.
No, my very first call in the evaluation process was whether I wanted to do it through telehealth or to wait 6 months and come into the facility. And so I started out with doing it virtually or through telehealth.
Okay. So the facility gave you the option. That's how they were adjusting to COVID, that they were doing all the pre-testing through virtual health or virtual visits, rather.
Yes, either
Okay.
or. You had to wait approximately 6 months if you wanted to come in, because they were having to, they were kind of backlogged because they hadn't been doing any evaluations there for about 2 or 3 months, I think. So.
Very well. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a question for Bill. How do you deal with the emotional drain or the letdown you feel after getting the call and not getting the kidney? How do you get past that?
Yeah. I can honestly say that it's not an emotional drain for me, because I always believe that all things work together for my good. So, sometimes people point out things that I'm going through, and I'm like, yeah, I am going through a lot, but I know things will get better. I know that even though I didn't get a kidney today, if I live, more days, I'm going to get a kidney. I'm going to get a kidney. There's no doubt in my mind. And I'm just going through some things on that way. You know, this is my journey. This is my, you know, my trip. But so there's no real emotional drain. Plus, I have a very positive wife who I really use. She's not my caregiver per se, but she is really like, she inspires me. So I have her to help me, and she does. So I really am very fortunate.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And this can be for either one of you. Has anyone discussed high KDPI kidneys with you?
I would say, yes. Yeah, they discussed that at the initial meeting. We were there for several hours, and they did discuss that. Matter of fact, one time a kidney was offered to me that was I'm forgetting what the issue. Either they were in prison or was I'm forgetting. Oh, Hep C antibodies. And I asked if that meant that they have hepatitis C. They said they can only tell me that they have the antibodies. I said, well, they must have had it at one point because they have the antibodies. They said, I can only tell you, you know, that they have the antibodies. I can't tell you if they have the active disease. So, and they said, even if they did, you can be healed of that very quickly. But they do discuss those. They do discuss those at the initial meeting.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And we have another one for you, actually it's for either one of you, but it started off, they addressed you, Bill. It says, Bill, I'm a person of faith too, and I understand. Thank you so much. Do you have to first complete all the tests at one transplant center before getting onto another transplant list?
Okay, no, but I was in a sort of an interesting situation. I started off at one center, and then I went to another in a different OPO, I think it's called. And both places suggested that I just stay with the one center because I have so many years on dialysis that things were going to move very quickly for me. So once they told me that, I just stayed with the initial center that I went to first. And at first, the second center was communicating with me, just asking me what tests I had, and I think they would even look at the tests. But then I didn't hear from them anymore, and I just stayed with the first center. They continued to do all the rest of the tests.
All right. Thank you, Rena, for submitting that, and thank you, Bill, for providing that information. And looks like we have one other question. While waiting for a transplant call, how are you managing COVID and if you're feeling isolated? Sherry or Bill?
I'll leave that with Bill since I am not actually waiting on a call yet, and Bill has more experience with that.
Okay, how am I dealing with COVID?
Yeah, how are you managing COVID or COVID-19, and any feelings of isolation?
I think, I'm sort of a homebody anyway, but my wife and I, we do, usually go out on walks and we do things together. But we wear our masks. We go to the store maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So we stay in the house a lot. We do stay on our porch a lot. We have taken to Facebook, which I started using since the COVID. I've gotten in contact with cousins, friends, my church, everything on Facebook, kidney patients on Facebook. And I talk on the phone. I call people that are that are not on Facebook, call them on the phone, see how they're doing. So I can't say that I really feel that isolated. I do have a wife, and like I say, we do things together, not like we did before. We don't go to games anymore. We don't go, but we do go walking. If we see too many people, we might, just shorten that trip. But so I don't really feel isolated too much. But we deal with it the best way we can. We try to stay socially, distant, and just do the things that we can to help ourselves and to help other people.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up this call, I'd again like to thank Sherry and Bill. We do have a few resources that we would like to share with everyone on the call. If I could have the next slide. So earlier during this call, we shared 2 areas of the NCC website to gain access to valuable resources. And now we'd like to share with you a few transplant-specific resources that you can find on the NCC website. The first one is Planning for a Kidney Transplant, and this tool was developed by transplant patients to offer tips that you can use to prepare for the transplant process. It discusses staying in contact with your healthcare team, the role of your social worker, and other members of the team. Another resource is Preparing for a Kidney Transplant, and this handout provides 7 tips, including don't skip or miss dialysis treatments and take your medications as prescribed. Both of these resources are available at www.esrdncc.org/patients, and then select the patient or the transplant menu. We can have the next slide. The Transplant 101 series was also developed by patients for patients and is made up of 7 resources and offers information to help you better understand the transplant journey. And it explains the kidney transplant process, the transplant team, kidney diet, what to expect after the transplant. You can read them one at a time or just select one topic that you might happen to have questions about. And this resource is available in English and Spanish. And you can visit this website, which is esrdncc.org/NPFE-LAN, and then select the Transplant Affinity Group menu. And on the next slide, we've been discussing COVID-19 during this call. So we'd also like to offer you some resources specific to the needs of COVID-19. And one resource is 11 things you can do to get ready for a transplant during COVID-19. And while this title of the resource explains the content, it offers tips such as how to stay in contact with your transplant team and what type of information you should be sure to share. It also outlines the importance of taking care of your emotional well-being. Sherry mentioned, and then we talked about telemedicine and how it impacted or can impact appointments. So Kidney Patient Care, Your Guide to Using Telemedicine is a toolkit that explains telemedicine. It also offers tips to enhance any appointments you may have, and it includes a checklist and an appointment tracker. Both of these resources and other COVID-19 resources can be found at kidneycovidinfocenter.com, and then click on the For Patients button, and then open the ESRD NCC Patient Resource menu. For our final resource, we just want to remind you about the kidneyhub.org. It's a mobile-friendly web app developed by the NCC with lots of input from our patient subject matter experts. It has information on home dialysis, the kidney transplant process, infection prevention, mental health, and more. And I have it saved on my home screen on my iPhone, and it makes it extremely easy to access useful information. So we definitely invite you to check that out today. And then feel free to let us know what you think about it by sending us an email, or if you have questions about it, you can send us an email as well. As a reminder, our next patient webinars occur on, we have a provider webinar on Wednesday, September the 15th, and that topic is living in a multi-generational household. That speaker is Amy Goyer from AARP, and then we have our patient focus event, which will be September 22nd. The event next week will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and then our patient focus event will be at 4 p.m. Please visit kidneycovidinfocenter.com for more information and to register. We'd like to thank you again for being with us this afternoon. We want to thank again Sherry and Bill for sharing a little piece of themselves with us. We learned a lot from you. And for any additional COVID-19 resources, feel free to visit the CASER website at casercoalition.com. And thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.